Hello and welcome to the Red Room. Our guest today is Richard, and also known as DM Bluddworth. We'll be talking about safety tools and safety tools on the OSR table. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. So a while ago, you published a document which was your project before. It's called Safety Tools of the OSR Table. I think it was meant as a joke or something like that at first, but then you developed it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so you're right. When I first started thinking about it, and it seems like every couple of months, the issue of safety tools kind of come up, amongst amongst Twitter and other channels dedicated to tabletop role-playing games or just role-playing games in general. And it does seem to just crop up its ugly head every 3 or 4 months or so. People saying, oh, we really need these safety tools because the community is so toxic, and the old school was, everything was so lacked diversity, and there was a lot of gatekeeping, and people weren't welcomed, and that's what drove people away, and just like the back and forth, and then it would lull down, and then it would pop up again, almost at random. It was coming up, and my own experience in the hobby, which goes back to my early childhood. So I was about 10 or 11 years old the first time that I played Dungeons and Dragons. So that would have been around 1977, 1978. And my gaming group was probably more diverse than most would probably expect. I mean, even to today's standards. I mean, my dungeon master was he was born in the United States, but his family was from India. My second dungeon master was Jewish. Another player was Chinese, and born in the United States, but his family was from China. I'm a mutt, so I'm Italian, Ukrainian, German, Irish, mixed, third generation, American. My grandparents had come over from the Ukraine and Italy, in the 1920s. So I'm third generation, here. Our other player was half Italian, half Puerto Rican, family from Puerto Rico, so that was our group. And it was like, yes, it was all male, I don't know about anyone's orientation at the time. At 10 or 11 years old, you didn't think about such things, and contrary to popular modern belief, or even maybe it's even a minority belief amongst game players, if a girl had asked to join our group, it would, oh, sure, great. What I'm saying? It was like, I don't know where they got the sense that, we weren't the He-Man Women's Haters Club, back then. We would have been like, hey, that's great. Just in my experience alone, and maybe this was something, fairly unique to the late 70s, Long Island, New York. I don't know of maybe the 30 or 40 kids that were playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time. None of them were girls. Girls weren't into role-playing games. Girls weren't into anything that was nerdy. And I don't think that my experience was very much different, than most, individuals at that time, in our, our small community, and other communities very similar to that. I mean, we were just what you would consider to be like very typical, middle class, Long Island, New York. So more diverse than maybe some other areas might have been. Certainly, probably more diverse than the Midwest, where role-playing games was really created. But Yeah, it's just the dynamic of elementary school, middle school, and high school. You had your cliques, so there was the nerdy kids, the jocks, the athletic kids, the kids that were kind of in between, the ones that were the pot smokers, and whatever you would call them. It was almost every clique that you'd see in like the novel The Outsiders. That was what that's what our school experience was like. And girls weren't going to join with the nerds. They'd ask us for help for homework, or study groups or that kind of thing, but they weren't looking to participate in our pastime.
In the
And
70s, it would, I don't think it would be okay for a girl to like nerdy stuff, right? If a girl liked nerdy stuff in the 70s, maybe that was still the pressure that was not good things for girls. I think maybe
yeah,
that starts changing on the 90s.
yeah, it was like, now there was certainly, like, if we're academic things, like computers really started to become a thing, when I was in junior high school and stuff. I mean, that's the spawn of the home computer and everything. They kind of ran parallel. Video games ran parallel to that. And there were girls in computer classes, so it wasn't like they weren't attracted to things that required a lot of smarts, a lot of mathematics or anything like that. That's another misnomer. That's I mean, that came out of Michael Merle's when he was like, oh, girls didn't play Dungeons and Dragons because it required a lot of math. Well, that didn't keep them out of the science club or the computer classes. They were there. They just weren't into nerdy stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's like academic was fine, but this stuff,
It's hobbies that
Yeah.
they wouldn't like
yeah.
it. My experience isn't all that different, and I started in '89. But in
Mhm.
Portugal, probably the things were a little slower. So by that time, the girls were still not playing video games. Also, well, role-playing games weren't a thing. So the first
Right.
role-playing game translated was the Red Box, the what's his name, Mentor's Dungeons and
Right.
Dragons, and well, the first and the only thing translated to Portuguese, to European Portuguese. And I bought it, but it wasn't a big success. It was something that a few people bought and played.
And that was in the 80s, right?
89, I think, 88,
Yeah.
89. I bought it in 89, I think. So girls weren't playing role-playing games, I think. Probably there was no girl playing role-playing games in Portugal. I don't know. Maybe there were. Um, but I know by my experience that they weren't interested in video games, in Star Wars, in Star Trek, in none of those things. Probably there were some, but I didn't know any. So, and I live in a place that is mostly middle class people, and
Mhm.
if they were interested, it would be middle class, not low middle class or upper class. Probably wouldn't be interested in this also.
Right.
So it's mostly the same thing. You were talking about those things, and well, it was like that in Portugal too. There were the groups, there were the nerds, and
Mhm.
the guys who were popular, and the jocks. They weren't called jocks, but okay, the guys who played soccer,
Yeah.
all that, and the girls wanted to hang around with those, not the nerds, not the nerdies.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was exactly, the way it was that it was just I don't know. I mean, I'm a middle school teacher. All right. But I'm a middle school teacher in the inner city of New York City. So I'm in the Bronx of New York City. And the kids do not seem to have cliques like we used to.
Mhm.
So there wasn't there isn't like a clear dividing line between the athletic kids and the smart kids, and the you know the girls that are the party girls, and the girls that are very very closed in and inclusive. They don't have goths, and they don't have those. They don't have as many of those real clear divisions. I think that they're more they're more heterogeneous in their no, I mean homogeneous in their likes and dislikes. Like they're pretty uniform in music. They're pretty uniform in the way that they dress. There's, I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, you had the clear group of kids that listened to heavy metal. You had all the girls listen to, pop rock and that kind of stuff. It was like, Madonna was over here and Iron Maiden was over there, and the only time they never meshed, and you weren't a guy listening to Madonna. You were forced to if your girlfriend was listening to it, but other than that, no guy was walking around with Madonna playing on their on their cassette player or their Walkman. It was just, I'm really dating myself, when you go back to Walkman, this was before iPods, so
Yeah,
it was.
I'm younger than the two of you, but I still remember. And then in my time, we had the grungers, we had the skaters, we had the surfers. But yeah, no, because I have two sisters that are very younger than me, and I never saw that on them. They have no groups, no cliques now.
I think that's a problem. At least the musical, the musical associated groups. For example, the guys who listen to metal and the punks and all that. People were interested in that, so they had some common interests, something that defined them. Besides those labels that now people are creating that come from nothing, so come from Twitter, usually come from Twitter discussions. I think it was better when people associated based on common interests, common likes and dislikes. Well, I don't know. Probably it was better for the socialization, I think.
Yeah, so that really might be, the big difference that I don't think that very many people, brought up, and I really didn't think about it until just now, comparing, my junior high school experience with my students. And, it was just now that I just had that, that thought that they really don't have those subgroups like we used to have. And our subgroups were hard subgroups. There was a clear line. You had a few kids that could cross over and be, amongst different groups. And I kind of found my way into that group when in the 10th grade, I started playing junior varsity hockey. All right. And so I crossed out of that, the nerdy side, and there was the nerdy side and the geek side. That was another separation, so the nerds tended to be, still high performing academic students, and the geeks were sort of, along those lines, but maybe not as smart, and but just would go to a different level of nerdiness that nerds didn't do. Those would have been the kids that were not just playing Dungeons and Dragons but dressing up to play Dungeons and Dragons. That kind of separation where taking it a little bit too far, and not separating fantasy from reality, so that's where I could see that difference was. But yeah, thinking about the kids today, they don't have those hard lines between their subgroups, so it is really hard to see subgroups amongst that. And that's probably a positive. All right, that's a positive because they do have much more in common than we used to have. And maybe that's why they think that we lack diversity. It wasn't that we were keeping anyone out. It's just that
people kept themselves out.
People wanted to come in.
I think well, maybe in the other groups people wanted to be jocks or something like that, and they couldn't. But no one wanted to be the geeks or the nerds, right? It's something that people didn't really want to be. They were, if they were not born like that, but if they grew up like that, that was their group. But that's not something that people wished they could be.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. It wasn't the most desirable of
Yeah.
groups. Like I said, the only time that they really, came to like the nerd side was when computers really started getting much more popular. And we were actually creating games. We were writing games, in those classes. And that's when, oh, that's really cool, because everybody loved video games. Like everybody was playing, Nintendo and Atari, and when PlayStation hit and they were playing sports games on PlayStation, that became, that's what really started to kill Dungeons and Dragons, at that time, because that started hitting around 87, 80, 87 through 89 or whatever. I don't know exactly when PlayStation 1 hit, but that started pulling a lot of the, primarily the boys away from role-playing games and into playing sports games and stuff like that on the gaming consoles. So
Well,
that's
now that you mentioned that, I was thinking perhaps that was role-playing games never became very popular in Portugal because those two things arrive at the same time.
yeah.
Role-playing games and the developing of video games. So, well, the video games won, of course.
Yeah, and it's much more accessible, and because there's no social grouping that you have to be a part of to play a video game. You know what I'm saying? It's like, most of the times it's single player, and even if it is multiplayer, you're not in the same space playing
Yeah,
multiplayer.
not necessarily. Yeah.
You're in different places, even in different parts of the world, playing multiplayer games. Um, so I mean, that's basically what my experience was. So when the idea of safety tools started coming up, over and over again, and I started thinking to myself, because I came from a very diverse group of players, I started saying, well, how do we run our table? And what were we doing at our table that would have been welcoming to anyone who wanted to come in? And that's when I started thinking about, well, let me write the safety tools of the OSR table, not for the OSR table, but I really wanted to talk about it from the perspective of, this is how our table was. These are the tools that we kind of used at our table. So it was real. It was something that was, that was done and time tested. And, that's why, but like you said, in the very beginning, initially, I was going to do a much more tongue-in-cheek kind of thing and be kind of belligerent about it. And then I started, thinking back to myself, you know what? I put my teacher hat on, and not just my internet troll hat on, and I started saying to myself, you know what? I think I could do more with this if I made it something that's teachable. And so that's when I kind of changed, the whole tone, and I started rewriting it. And I mean, it's only like 8 pages, and I wanted to keep it short because I wanted it to be really genuine. I don't think you need a whole lot of, and they're not really rules. They're just things that we did, and they're suggestions, if anything. And it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be, a 30-page booklet on it. But it also, it's not an index card kind of thing either, because there are multiple layers of it that I think that if you wanted to treat it like like something that's serious, then it's got to be a few pages long. It's got to hit all those different marks on it.
Oh, I think you had the right idea, because there are some people who are already doing the hostile, belligerent thing, right? Making fun of all this. So someone had to come ahead and do something more serious about it. Okay, so perhaps we could give some context and talk about those safety tools that that were showing up. I'm not sure about the history of it, but I think probably Lines and Veils by Ron Edwards was probably the first one. I'm not sure where this introduced, but if it was in Sorcerer, it was about 20 years ago, maybe. It was his first game, I think, first published game.
Let me see. Let me pull it up. So you're talking about, let's see. I keep on losing it. I had it on my page here and now I lost it. It's a new computer and I'm still trying to learn the different interface. Are we still here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how bad this new computer is. Or me trying to work out this new computer. Somehow I lost it again. That is so strange. All right, I am going to just try to find you again. And now I lost you.
Yeah, Zoom sometimes minimizes the window. It gets small and in a corner.
Yeah. Probably in the upper right corner, maybe behind something.
Yes, I X'd out of something and now I have, there we go. There we go. I got you back now. All right. You know what? I'm not going to keep on trying to do that. So I'm just going to keep you on the screen so I know I'm still talking to you.
I'm reading this from here. Okay, so I can edit.
Please.
I can edit this out.
Yeah.
So okay. So Lines and Veils by Ron Edwards. I'm not sure when this was introduced. I suppose it was in Sorcerer, and that was about 20 years ago. So this is supposed to be used before play. So the players talk about the contents they don't want to, so there are two things: the lines and the veils.
Okay.
The lines are contents the players want to exclude, and the veils are topics that can be used, but in a softened way. So not a very harsh way of handling things.
Yeah, and when that came up, and you see, I believe in having like a session 0. All right, and of all of the safety tools that they talk about, you know, that's the one that, and we had that back in the day. We just didn't call it that. We didn't have a name for a lot of these things. We just did them.
Yeah.
You know, and so to me, it's just like you as a dungeon master or game master, you know, depending on the game you're playing, you're going to tell your players, this is what we're going to be playing. This is kind of the, you know, roughly the theme of it. This is what it's all about. And that kind of included, like, again, we didn't put a rating system on it, but we were kids. We virtually were never running anything that was really, you know, rated R plus kind of stuff. I mean, it might have been violent here or there, and it might have been even like if we were doing like horror things, like, you know, Call of Cthulhu or something, then yeah, it could be very graphically violent. But we never considered that to be like a taboo, you know, area. We were not doing anything that would have been egregiously unacceptable, you know. So, you know, no violence against women, no violence against children, you know, very explicitly or anything like that. I mean, we would have had, depending on the game setting and such, I mean, there would have been slavery, but it was slavery conducted by the bad guys. And you were always working against it, you know, or at least you were supposed to be working against it. So where would you, you know, in D&D, it would be hobgoblins are very traditional D&D slaver, you know, humanoid race. They enslaved goblins, they enslaved orcs. If they had the chance, they would, you know, they would subjugate whoever they conquered, and they would utilize them for forced labor. I mean, so you weren't siding with the hobgoblins, you were, you know, fighting against them, you know, generally speaking. It's like, you know, so there were things like in Star Wars, when we played Star Wars, and there was like a spice trade that was going on, and these were the drug dealers basically, and they weren't the good guys, you know. So anytime there was anything that was a little bit questionable, you know, it was never portrayed as being something that you wanted to support or, you know, fight to keep. You were usually a group of adventurers fighting against it. So when it came for those, well, what are we going to leave out? We automatically left out those things, So I described in both the article and numerous times on my channel talking about this. I look at if you're running a PG-13, which is how I view almost every role-playing game out there, it's basically written at a PG-13. So if you are above the age of 13, you should be able to handle anything that is coming out of the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Monster Manual, and the Player's Handbook, of any game that you're talking about. It's like they're all written at that level. I mean, with the exception of maybe Fatal, which I've never actually read, but there's plenty of little excerpts that I've seen and everything else. Like, yeah, that's I think that's oh, excuse me. I think that's intentionally, maybe even some semi like tongue in cheek. Like, I'm going to go as off the rails as I possibly can and just see how much I can get away with, with it. And so really just looking to push that envelope for the sake of pushing the envelope. But no one ran their games like that, or very, very few would run their games that way. And so I didn't see the need to have a safety tool. The other thing, like lines and veils, like skipping over items, or fade to black, or the X card, which
that's a bit more intrusive because it's in game, so
you're
it's stopping the session.
And what really got me into this whole issue of safety tools was when Monty Cook released their 16-page safety tools thing, and I broke that thing down in a video, point by point, and what I kept on taking away from each of those suggestions was it's the tyranny of the one.
Yeah.
All right. It always boiled down to, if one person didn't like what was going on, it wasn't, well, they'll step away. It was, everything has to stop and fast forward beyond it. And then even worse, it was like everyone at the table had to apologize for it being there, whether they were aware of it or not, but they had to apologize for it and promise that it would never happen again. All right. And then as I kept on going through it, then it was like, well, if they should come up with something else that occurred, that suddenly they found that they were triggered by, even though they hadn't originally said it, well, that has to be removed too, and again, there has to be an apology, and at this point, maybe you should just stop playing altogether, and go back to assess it. And I'm like, how does that work in an organized, gameplay where you have a very limited time? You have 4 hours, you have 4 hours to do this thing. And after that 4-hour session, like convention play or, online, play, you have 4 hours to play. And that time is used up with X cards and all kinds of, stuff like that. You're just going to totally destroy the experience of everybody at the table for the desires of the one. And so that's when I was like, this is just too intrusive. It's too draconian, because they were starting to enforce this to be used at conventions. All right. And you saw it like the UK Game Expo, or whatever their big RPG expo is called. And then Gen Con did the same thing around the same time. They were all saying, no, you have to have some kind of safety tool, at your table. Otherwise you cannot run your game.
Well, since you talked about that, that's something. My experience here is, well, of course, Portugal. It's nothing like the US. So usually when we talk about the safety tools, and you are arguing with someone that likes that and that thinks that they should be used, they usually say, well, you don't have to use them. But then there's the conventions, there's the game stores, there's all those organized places where you. How is that? How is those? How are those organized games handling this? They are forcing people to use consent tools and safety tools and X cards and all that. They are.
Yeah, some of them actually put out on their official websites that these must be allowed. You cannot deny them. So like the X card, and I'm fairly certain it was Gen Con came out and they said that yeah, you cannot disallow the use of X cards at the tables, and I don't know, this is going back obviously this is going back pre-COVID,
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
when
of
people were
course.
still going, in person. So we're going back almost 2 years or a little bit over 2 years. So yeah, this really started coming out and being pushed before everyone went remote, because you don't hear about it as much now
Yeah, of
as you
course.
did back then, because you don't have the in-person conventions.
Yeah, but if you're
Also,
streaming, you need to be careful. For example, if you're streaming your game, because people that are
Yeah.
watching may be offended.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
another.
Yeah, there's pressure anyway.
yeah, I would think that there's pressure, and they'll remove videos of I'm sure that there were certain games that you cannot do a live stream. I mean, if you're trying to run, I mean, you could test that. If anybody actually has a copy of Fatal, try to run it on, on YouTube and see how long it takes before YouTube will start taking it down, or somebody will put, kind of, strikes against it or whatever. They'll do everything they can to remove it. I mean, they've removed creators, they've removed DMs and players and everything. They had that big controversy with the UK Game Expo with a guy running the Kids on Bikes scenario, and it was totally taken out of context. I know Grim Jim had brought it up, or brought the guy on. I'm sure you probably know of the incident that I was talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I remember it being mentioned. Yes.
Yeah, where the assumption was that everyone were like, the characters were, first of all, underage, which was not true. The game table was for adults only. It was 18 plus, and the assumption was that because the characters had woken up naked and beaten, and thrown in a cellar or something, that more had been done to them than just the fact that they were, stripped down, beaten, and thrown in the cellar. The assumption was that more was done. And so that's where they ran with it. And it wasn't talked about or complained about at the time at the table. It was done after the fact that they made this big deal about it. And, there was, it was already done, and it wasn't part of, and there was the warning label and everything, like, this is an adults only game, and there were some adult themes in it, but it certainly wasn't what they made it to be. And yet he got a lifetime ban, and he was somebody who was running games at that convention, and that's the premier convention in, possibly even in Europe, not just the UK. So that would be like getting banned from Gen Con, here in the United States. And there was no recourse. There was no, where's the evidence that this happened? This was here's the game that I ran. You can read, you could read it, and it was, didn't matter. And, the facts didn't matter.
That also prove that safety tools don't work.
Yeah, it's like, because he did have labeling of, this is the theme, this is, what you're, this is the age category, and and it wasn't even, I don't think it was Tales from the Loop. I think it was the game that follows Tales from the Loop. So I mean, so it might be a little bit edgier, but it certainly wasn't, it wasn't like Grim Jim's game, actual fucking monsters. It was, it wasn't that level of, shocking, shock value, but it wasn't certainly what this one individual, what she took away from it was completely, completely off base and possibly even fabricated, and that was the other thing that was said, because, this is at a time when, Me Too was a big deal, and Gamergate was being regurgitated again, and so there was a lot going on within the hobby and the other hobbies that kind of in the periphery of role playing. So comic books, it was going on, quite a bit as well. Some of the same players, also involved, so you had some of the women involved with video games and comic books, and now they had set their sights about 3 years ago on the tabletop role-playing hobby to, well, let's start affecting that same kind of changes in, in this hobby as well. So, so again, that's kind of why I wanted to go back to looking at, well, what did we do back in the 1980s, when, when we were running our tables and we didn't have any of this. We didn't have any of these kinds of problems. We never had people coming to the table and making demands on what content was going to be in your game. They came and sat down and played, and there also wasn't this notion of, and this is again a difference between old school and modern. I only once created a character that I wanted to kind of model it after myself, you know what I'm saying? So kind of see myself in the game. And that was Twilight 2000, so I was playing Twilight 2000 in 1987, 88. I joined the army in 1990, so I was already kind of along that kind of path that I knew I was going to probably go into the military, and I was at least thinking about it. And so when I did that, I actually gave my character my last name, and just played it like kind of like that, and had basically my stature and all of that. It was the only time. There was never a Dungeons and Dragons game or a Call of Cthulhu game or anything where I said, well, I don't see myself in this game, just wasn't, so that whole individual representation.
People now, new players, younger players seem to be more invested in that way, so that they'll look at their characters as themselves, or version of themselves.
Maybe it's because of computer games, because in some computer games you can customize your characters, and maybe they are used to playing a character that looks like. I don't do that. I always create characters that don't look like me, but maybe they are used to doing that.
Yeah, I again, like you said, I mean, I came out of computer games too. I mean, I went from tabletop role-playing games to just computer games for almost 20 years. So from 1990 to 2015, I was nothing but consoles and computer games, and then massively multiplayer online games, so MMOs, up until about 2014, 2015. And that's when I came back to tabletop role-playing games, and I put most of the computer games and everything behind me. And so I was very much the same as, the modern role player now who came up through computer gaming, still never did that, still never created myself in any of those games. We were just, it was escapism. And that's what we were looking for when we were playing these role-playing games, was to escape our reality and to just play something just to pass the time and to have fun and not have to worry about real world stuff, for a couple of hours, several times a week or whatever, so yeah, it's just they're looking for something different from gaming than what we, did in the past. And I think that's the real dividing line, is that they're looking for affirmation and therapy from role playing,
That's
and
that's
we
that's
didn't.
really strange to look for therapy in the role. Okay, so role-playing games can be used as therapy, but that's not
Mhm.
this role-playing
Yeah,
games.
it needs to be done with a psychiatrist or a
Yes,
therapist, not a game master.
the game master is not trained for that, so it's
Right,
it's
and
very weird.
that's often generally not done as a group either,
Yeah.
Exactly.
by a therapist. It's usually a one-on-one, and that's how they handle that. I mean, it's not theater class either, and that's but even in a theater class, you're still not portraying yourself.
Yeah.
You know
Exactly.
what I'm saying? You're still portraying your characters, so you're doing more improv and doing that kind of thing, and that's the other element that has been introduced to the hobby. That whole idea that, oh, this is all about, storytelling and theater and that kind of stuff. That's your Critical Role Matt Mercer effect,
Mhm.
where they all expect that this is what it's going to look like when they're actually playing at the table. And so you
Yeah.
have all of these just
Well,
different
those
ideas
guys are actors, so
clashing.
they are supposed to.
Yeah,
It never looks like that,
no, and
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 it's
to
probably scripted. I'm not sure. I've
of
never.
course it's scripted,
It's,
yes. And to Matt Mercer's credit, um although he doesn't say that it's scripted, he doesn't come
Mhm.
that far out, but he comes out and says, you should not be trying to duplicate this.
Yeah.
All right, this is not really, what it appears. This is not the way your table is going to run. We are all professional actors here. I mean, he does say that, and this is not the ideal. This is not what you're going to be able to produce unless you're at that same level of
Yeah.
production and all of that. Um so I do give him credit in that. I give him credit in the fact that he's brought, and his group has brought, a lot of people into the hobby. I just don't know if they were the most positive people to bring into the hobby. You know what I'm saying? It's like or their ideas, or
Yes.
what
Yeah.
their expectations.
Exactly.
It appears that
Yeah,
it wasn't the best people
yeah,
to come, because they
And
are waiting for, they are wishing for something different that doesn't exist, and
but
it
yeah,
will not
yeah, it
exist
exists.
anyway.
Yeah,
and
it
probably
exists
they
on a
think it's
set.
because, yeah, it's because the old players are gatekeeping. So maybe to be like
Yeah,
that. Yes, that's why you want to play like cool without us.
yeah, yeah. That's where it comes from. It's like, well, oh well, if you're not running your game that way, then you must be gatekeeping. You're trying to keep, people out because you don't want the. It's like, no, I don't have the ability to do that. You know, I'm not. I don't have a $500,000, set that we're doing this on. I don't have, editing capability of doing this kind of thing. So it's just, and we're not scripted, and they're not playing any game that you can purchase. All right, and that's the other thing that's often not put there. They're using a bare bones of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and then everything else is just off the top of their heads, and it's modified. It's tremendously modified what they're actually doing, and I don't think that they spend most of their time looking at their screens, their iPads or whatever they have in front of them. They're not even rolling physical dice for the most part that I can say. I mean, I've only watched an episode here or there, and never a full episode. I can't sit through and watch people playing for 3 hours. To me, it's not appealing. It's why I never do live plays, or
Yeah.
I mean, back in the very early, I did live plays, but ever since then, I just do recaps, because I was like, who really wants to sit there and watch other people play for 3 hours? If I have 3 hours, I'm gonna play
yourself.
myself.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna run a game. I'm not going to watch somebody else play.
I record our game sessions because I need to watch them later, so I can.
Yeah, and
Well,
I'm
not
writing,
from beginning to end, but yeah,
and
bits
I'm
of
writing
it.
the recap, so I have to hear them, and yeah, it gets
Yeah.
tedious. Like, I'm sick of this.
Yeah.
And you're
Too
watching
long.
ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't, because I don't record our game sessions, so I just kind of like take some brief notes here and there, and then I forget, different parts, but I just roll with the recap anyway. And then my players would be like, no, that wasn't me, that was him, and I was like, well, there's 9 of you. I can't keep you all straight in my head sometimes. So and that's why it's kind of bad when we go, far off in our, from our recaps, and it's just harder to remember everything that's going on. But again, and that's another thing about safety tools that I don't think are often brought up, is that in many of our experiences, especially older, old school players, we're playing with groups of people we've been playing with for a long time, and it's not always, the complete strangers coming together at a table. That's a convention setting kind of thing. So if you need safety tools at a table amongst your friends, there's a problem. You know what I'm saying? It's like, now you don't even know who you're playing with, and these are people that you might have in your house, or you meet every single week for 6 months or more at a library. That's where we used to play more publicly, was in a library when we were kids. But if we were at a friend's house, what safety tools? You don't need them. It's like, you're all friends, you know each other,
Yeah.
If Johnny's mother and father just got a divorce, you're not going to talk about that in your game. It's like they never went that much into detail about real life stuff in the games. At least we never did, and that's another thing that I started to develop as a game master, and maybe this is a safety tool, I don't know. I like for my players to think of their characters as being the exception, right? So they're the exceptional characters. They're the focus of everything that's going on. And NPCs only become important when they need to be important. And then they fade back into the background, and I guess it's a very egocentric thing that I'm trying to create amongst my players for their characters, is that, oh, no, because I expect that they are going to buy into the idea that they're going to be facing great challenges, and they're going to have to do great things, or at least attempt great things. And their players could certainly, their characters, their characters could certainly die doing these great things. And so they don't have time to think about the people on the periphery, the NPCs and everything, because they're only important for that brief moment. What's really important is the other characters in your group, and so as long as you're all, clicking and meshing together and everything like that, and moving forward, that's the experience that I'm trying to create at the table. So the idea of someone at the table saying, no, stop. Can we skip over this? Never in 40 years has that ever come up. All right. I've never encountered that in a multiplayer online game before. And I've played some pretty harsh ones, It's like no one had ever said, oh, time out. I'm triggered by the fact that I just lost a ship that I paid real dollars for, you know, in EVE Online or in World of Warcraft, you know, oh wait, you know, someone is squatting over my dead body's face, you know, because I've just been killed by that character, and now they're squatting over me. I can't play this anymore. No, it was just, we separated, you know, our real selves from what was going on in the game.
And for an example, if you are triggered by cobwebs and dust, maybe you shouldn't be playing a dungeon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a, you know, and you know, when Monty Cook's game, his you know, safety tools came out, I had brought that up. I was like, wait a second, because the example that was given was someone afraid of spiders, and they were told clearly that they were going into
I'm trying to show
Demon
the
Queen of the Web Pits.
no,
You know,
and
and
disappeared.
yeah, and I was like, wait a second, how could you ask them to remove something that was an integral part of the adventure? No, that's where you as an adult, because you should be over 13 years old, you as an adult are going to say, no, this is not the game for me, and go find a different table to play at. You know, but no, that's not what the Monty Cook safety tool said. The DM was supposed to remove it. That was the only thing that they were supposed to do. And if they didn't do that, the person could go to that convention, you know, the floor manager, and say, I used an X card and they refused to acknowledge it. All right, that game needs to be shut down. And I guarantee you that would happen.
So
You
that's
know,
the
and
thing. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
it's the
So
power of one.
if
Yes.
you say that,
yes,
if someone says, okay, you don't have to use those things if you don't want to, but you do have to use them when they are
Yeah.
enforced by someone.
yes, they'll be enforced by the whomever is the floor manager of a convention, or it could be the store owner of the game shop that you're playing at. You know, that was the other thing that I brought up as well, was that we didn't play in game stores back in the day. There were no tables set up for playing in store back in the day, you know, back from, I'd say from 1977 through 1989. If we wanted a public place to play, we went to the library. You know, the hobby shops that I went to, they had nothing but shelf space. They were selling stuff. They were, you know, there were no tables set up. Now this was maybe before like Warhammer really exploded, because that's where you need a lot of table space for. You know, when Warhammer started hitting, which I'd say is probably around, like in my area, like mid 80s or maybe even late 80s, people were still probably playing those in their basements. They were not going to gaming shops. So that's another change, where you walk into even a small gaming shop now, where there's very few of them left. You walk into a small gaming shop now, and there will be a couple of tables there for people to play. All right, but they're usually not playing role-playing games. They're playing card games. They're playing the battle card games. They're playing I mean, back then it was, you know, it was Pokemon, and then Yu-Gi-Oh, and now it's Magic the Gathering, you know, or whatever else. But there weren't those public spaces or even commercial spaces to play games at back in the day. Everyone was playing privately or in the public library.
I was looking at the checklist from Monty Cook's, and there are, well, she mentioned some of those, but there are very strange things. Well, okay, I can relate that some of these are supposed to be phobias, but okay, bugs and blood and demons and rats and spiders and romance. There can be no romance.
Yeah.
And that, well, if you take out blood, I'm not sure what I mean, because there's always violence. There's no it can be maybe they mentions of blood. I'm not sure, but this list is very strange.
Wind is there also, right?
No,
No.
seems not
I
anymore.
know.
That,
You
or
cannot
that
have wind.
perhaps that was another list. I'm not sure. There was,
Yeah,
well, they either changed this list or there was another list that had dust and wind. I remember that. Perhaps they
dust and wind.
perhaps they took this out from the
Yeah.
list because I
Uh,
downloaded this today, and I think the first version had dust and wind and some other stuff that are not here anymore. Or maybe it was a different checklist. I'm not sure, but still, if it's stroke and
yeah, well, I mean, I know that like blood and skeletons cannot be in a Chinese release game. All right. So China does have because they have a strong cultural ancestral worship thing. So you can't have like undead and those kinds of things and blood and that's in video games as well. So like video games have to be modified in order to be released in China, particularly for those things. But we're not talking about the Chinese market here. We're talking about an American, European market. I mean, Call of Cthulhu is the Japanese market, so they obviously don't have the same issues as China does. But if you remove those things, like I can have sharp objects, but it's not just that my character can't use these sharp objects, but no one at the table's characters can use these sharp objects either. Well, now the fighter is limited in what he or she can carry and so on and so on. It just becomes the tyranny of the one, which is what I mentioned. It's like, if you're not ready to play at this table, I think I say that in my my thing.
yeah,
It's not are you ready to play, or is the table ready for you? It's are you ready for this table? Because this table is not going to change for you. You have to come ready to play what is being presented. And if you can't, that's fine. You're welcome to, say, hey, you know what? I thought I could try this, but I can't. I'm just gonna leave. Or if you need to take a breather, that's okay too. Say, hey, you know what? This is getting a little intense for me. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'm gonna get a drink. I'll be right back, and then come back. But the game keeps on going.
mhm.
And we'll fill you in after you get back. But if you're going to get up 2-3 times during the game session, you know what? I appreciate that you're trying, but if you really can't handle this, then, maybe there's a different game for you to go to. All right. Be polite about it, be, understanding about it, but, the game's got to go on.
That's the problem with inclusiveness, because you're supposed to include one person, you have to change things for everyone. So everyone need to change to accommodate that one person.
Right.
And that option that everybody has to walk away, that is being that seems that it's not important, but well, everybody can walk away, and that's important because that was the safety tool we always had. If you don't like what's being played, you just don't play it.
Yeah. Well, they don't like that because it's not an affirmation of what they're feeling. All right. And so that's gatekeeping. It's like you have to not just acknowledge that they feel that way, you have to accept what they're feeling and then modify what you're doing to accommodate.
Apologize.
Yeah, and then apologize for it, and that's the real disconnect. And I see this not just in gameplay, but I see this in the conversations that people are having, in academia. I see it too. So here in the United States, I have this this movement that's going on where they're actually rejecting, and we just had Martin Luther King Jr.'s celebrated day passed last week, and the whole idea of a colorblind society, all right, where you don't see a person for the color of their skin, but that you judge them based on the character, the quality of their character. that's being rejected. It's like, if you don't see color, then you don't see me. All right, because I am my color, and it's just such a divisive way, because it's a self-dividing. You're pushing yourself away from being considered for the person that you are, but just your skin color, and that's how they want to feel like, oh no, if you don't acknowledge me, then you don't appreciate me. It's like, no, I'm looking at you for the person that you are, and not for the color of your skin, or your ethnic background, or your religious background, or your gender, or whatever. I'm just, you're a person. You're my friend at the table. You're, and that's it. I'm going to address you by your name rather than your pronoun, which is another crazy thing that's going on. It's like, no. If, I don't care if you want to be called, if you're a male and you want to be considered a female, and you want to be called, she and her. If you're, you want to be, instead of Reginald, now you're Regina. All right, I'm going to call you Regina. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but, I'll just avoid, using a pronoun that doesn't really match, how I've known you, or whatever. But, I'm not going to intentionally, harm your emotional standing by using something that's not, that's not how you want to be addressed. But I'm also not going to play into some kind of a name game kind of thing. I'm going to call you, by the name that you're choosing by, but not necessarily by your pronoun. It's not, it's just such a weird place that they're taking popular culture to, where you're supposed to, it's no longer fine to say, I don't care what you are, I care about who you are. That's not acceptable anymore. It just doesn't make sense.
The progressives now wear their labels, and the labels are more important than anything else.
But there are outrageous things like that math is racist, because there comes the idea that black people are not very good at math. So math is now racist.
And punctuality.
Yes, in punctuality and organization. That is so racist to assume that.
And once that becomes part of safety tools, I mean, you can't do anything. It's like, I can't have anybody at my table because, I'll go play Skyrim. It's so much easier just to play Skyrim than it is to engage with.
It has a lot of skeletons. It can be played in China, I think. If they take away all the skeletons, they can play Skyrim.
And the zombies, all the not zombies, the
Daugers.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's just like they're pushing it. I think they're pushing it to the point that their true goal is to destroy it. All right, and I think that's what it is. I think their real goal is to tear it all down, destroy it, and then move on to the next thing, because they did that with comic books. All right, they destroyed comic books. Comic books are dead. All right, no comic book store is surviving based on selling comic books anymore. They have to survive by selling Magic the Gathering. That's the only thing that's keeping them open. Because it's not D&D, it's not comic books, it's Magic the Gathering and models, the miniatures and stuff like that, and the bobblehead toys, and it's all of the peripheral stuff. It's not the actual games, except for the card battle games. That's the only thing that keeps stores open, that are catered to hobbies. It's just, I think that's their goal.
Do you think they will be able to destroy Dungeons and Dragons, because it's a huge game, right? And it belongs to Hasbro. So do you think they will run it down?
Well, they're watering it down, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They're certainly watering it down.
The game itself is changing now.
Yeah, they're changing the game to the point that it is no longer the game it used to be. I mean, I really try to avoid calling it Dungeons and Dragons because it's not what the game was originally, designed to be. It's not a game of heroic fantasy where you're fighting, good versus evil, and you're meant to be the good guys, and you're meant to be challenged, and you're meant to do these great things or die trying to. And now it's you're a barista in a coffee shop. Not to jump on the the bandwagon of this really stinks, but even the dynamic of, let's say, Strixhaven, where they're talking about, so this is a magic school. Fine, great, you create a magic school, that's fantastic. How are they going for, how do you justify within the game and the game system that they're going from levels 1 to 10 in a magic school?
That's strange.
It's
too powerful, right?
Yeah, you're doing an entire career, adventuring career, in 2 years of a magic school.
2 years is
I'm saying
not
if you wanted to create a Harry Potter like magic school, then and that's cool if you want to do that. You're starting out as a 0 level character and you graduate at level 1.
Yeah.
That's a magic school. You're walking out of the magic school as a 1st level magic user. All right. And everybody in the school is an aspiring magic user. You don't have any barbarians getting entry level to 1st level spells. All right. In total defiance of 47 years of game lore, or ever since they had barbarians do go all the way back to 1974. So it just doesn't make any sense. And it's that inclusive mentality that they have, that it's not inclusion to allow everybody to come in. It's the inclusion of allow everybody to do whatever they want. That's the negative inclusiveness that I don't think that they understand.
Including pausing and rewinding, right? Restarting a scene or something like that. There's one of those safety tools that implies that you can go back. So my character died. Oh yeah, let's go back. I didn't like that.
They have the rewind. It's like a mulligan. It's like you could just undo it. And to me, it's like, what? There's another YouTube channel that someone was saying, oh, this person likes Strixhaven too. And he actually spoke of 2 things that were just blew my mind. Number 1, he said, yeah, there are so many spells that make the challenges that the people are actually facing in, the characters are actually facing in Strixhaven, that gives them automatic success. And that's a great thing. They have multiple spells that can give them automatic success. And I was like, all right, so you just took, and there's cheating. You can cheat on the tests. And so you can succeed by cheating, and you still get the same outcome. And then he went to the next level of it, and he said, and this really does play out like a video game. I was like, you could just, stop right there. You're done. You're done. I said, I don't care. You have 500,000 subs. You just lost all credibility. All right. Because you not only just compared it to a video game, but you made it that's a good thing, that this is a video game. And that's the real change so they have not rejected 4th edition, because 4th edition was the MMO edition. That was WoW, D&D WoW, D&D World of Warcraft. All right, that was their Hail Mary to capture World of Warcraft players to come over to Dungeons and Dragons. And it is widely considered to be an utter disaster. All right. No one considers that a good version of Dungeons and Dragons. And it's the reason why Pathfinder exceeded Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons for a number of years. All right. And 5th edition was the only thing that brought that back to Wizards of the Coast. And now they're bringing they're bringing 5th edition back to its 4th edition roots. All right. And the reason why is because both Jeremy Crawford and I'm going to forget his I think it's John Perkins, so the 2 lead designer people of 5th edition were both heavily involved in playing 4th edition. That's when they were introduced. So they're not rejecting the 4th edition. This is a video game, all right, played on a tabletop. They're actually moving the game back towards that. Mike Merles was the one that kept it away from that. All right, these 2 guys now are bringing it back to that. And that's that video game mentality. And to their own statement, the average campaign in 5th edition only lasts 6 sessions.
That's not
Right.
not really, well, that definitely not D&D. It can't be like that.
Yeah, that's there's no, you can just imagine how little group dynamic amongst players, how much character development that you can actually have in just 6 sessions.
Yeah.
Right, 6 sessions might be 24 hours of gameplay. That's less than a video game.
Yeah.
All right.
A good video game role play like Skyrim, it's at least 100 hours.
Yeah. So it's even less immersive than a video game. All right. When you're that short. And then on top of that, they said that the average 5e game table doesn't start out with their characters at 1st level. They start out at like 5th level. All right, and the power curve in that game system skyrockets after 7th. So they're jumping right to the top, basically, in that game system. So you don't have, so this is why they're coming with these copious notes of backstory. This is why they're coming with all of these preconceived plans for what their characters are going to be able to accomplish, and why they're virtually invincible, and they're I almost misstated the word. They're in infanticide. It's not infanticide. That's killing them off. They're
Infantilized.
Infantilized. Thank
Yes,
you. Infantilized. They're infantilized. They're coming to it like, I had said in a comment on that one thing. I was like, according to your definition of what Strixhaven actually is, this is written for ages 5+.
Mhm.
All right. This is a baby's game. All right. It's not even a young adult's game. This is a baby's game that you're developing. You're creating a game for kids to play. And it's a video game on paper. And so that's why you need safety tools, because when you have these people that are coming to the table that are very immature.
But they aren't that young, right? They aren't they aren't that young. They aren't 5 years old or 6. They're older.
No, these are in some cases, these are adults coming to the table that can handle PG-13 material. And that's why I wrote, if you're an adult coming to my table and I'm running a Dungeons and Dragons game session and it is clearly marked as PG-13 and you're 27 years old and you come to me and you say, well, I can't handle any any spiders in there. Bye. Goodbye. You come to my table with that consent form, rejected. Goodbye. come to me when you're old enough, mature enough to handle PG-13. Otherwise, don't come to my table at all. All right.
I will do the
That's
same.
when I will become a
I'm sure.
gatekeeper.
I'm very sure
Yeah.
I will do the same. Well, I don't have
Yeah.
to because I'm always playing with the same people, and that's what they sometimes say when I'm discussing the need for safety tools. Ah, yeah, you probably always play with the same people. Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah.
But if someone new comes to play with me, well, actually, I don't even ask about that. People come and I say, okay, is this a horror game? And I usually run horror games, as you probably already know.
Right. Yeah.
Very well. Now we are playing a science fiction or semi science fiction, horror science fiction, but it's mostly science fiction.
Right.
But okay, so if one says, okay, it's a horror game, the other person, the new player, should be prepared. It's a horror game. It's not My Little Pony. It's not Power Rangers. It's a horror game. It might be different kinds of horror. Okay, so we can be explicit about it. It's a ghost things. It's an investigative thing, a Call of Cthulhu type game. But okay, or is a Clive Barker type of game, and it's harder. And,
Right.
there's other references, sex and violence and all that, torture.
The mature game, but horror should be more mature always.
Usually, that's it.
Yeah.
And even a fantasy game, it can be dark fantasy. For example, The Witcher, not the role playing game, but the video game. It's a little bit more violent than Dragon Age or something like that, and there's some other themes that aren't discussed in other games, in other fantasy games. But it's still played by the same people. And well, okay, so if you can't handle it, you can't handle it. You can play something else. But I can't. I've never done that. I have never had the need to say, okay, so you can't handle this, go away. Never had that problem. People come play with me. Never complained about anything, and I obviously haven't used safety tools. Never felt the need. But even if someone asked, if someone asked me, will you use an X card or no, I'm not. Never.
Yeah.
I refuse.
Yeah. I've actually had some people, on the OSR side say, well, as a DM, I want an X card, so I can say, nope, you have to go. That's my safety. The red card. Let me eject you, like in football or soccer.
Yeah.
You just got a red. Here's your yellow. Just take it out of your pocket. Use the next card, you're going to get a yellow card.
Yeah, because as a dungeon master or game master, you have the power to decide who you want at your table. If there's one person that is ruining the game for everyone, it shouldn't be there.
No, that's right. It's like that's why I think it is important to have that little placard on your table. If you're playing in a convention style thing, have it on your table. This is the game I'm playing. These are the rules that I'm using. This is the rating, so it's PG-13. If it's R, it's R. Adults only, or all are welcome, or whatever. And some of the major themes that might be on there, and that's it. You don't have to discuss anything else beyond that. It's right there. If you sit down, that is consent to everything that's within there. I promise that nothing that doesn't appear on there will appear in the game. I'm not going to sandbag you. I'm not going to surprise you with some kind of a theme that wasn't suggested earlier on, but you kind of know what the game is. You should know what, unless you're coming to the table and say, I really don't know anything about this game. Like, I don't know anything about Call of Cthulhu. Then you might have to go in and say, well, here's some of the things that you might encounter, in this game, and then let them decide. If they sit, they're ready to play. All right. If they want to get up and walk away because they thought they were ready for it, they're not, that's perfectly fine. We can go with 4 players. We can run with 3 players. We can run with 2. We can even run with 1 player at the table. All right. We could still continue on, but the story, the adventure will still continue on, and everybody will be converted into an NPC, and we'll finish it out for that last player standing in order to do it. But the one thing I would never do, never accept is to have one person say the game has to stop. No, it's not going to happen. We're going to keep on moving forward. Even if a floor manager came in and said, you got to shut this table down. Hey, you know what? I have a room upstairs. We can go up there and we'll finish out this game session. We'll all come back down to the floor afterwards. If you want to do that, we can go up there and finish it out and leave it up to the players to decide. Or we'll go to the cafe. We'll finish this in a hallway if we have to. All right. But we will finish this game session, as it was, promised to those that signed up for it.
That is basically what you have to do now if you are really running it in a convention, right? You can't just refuse to use their methods.
Yeah.
So you have to adapt. And that's what you were saying before, that if you just put a warning about what will be used and what will be the themes, that would probably be an acceptable way. I could understand that it's just a way to alert people.
Yeah, no, that should be acceptable to any reasonably minded adult. That should be fine. Like I said, if you're running a game for kids, all right, you have to you have to keep that in mind, that you're running a game for kids. If you put anything inappropriate and you're running a game for kids, I'll be the first one to say your ass is out of there. You should be barred. You should not be allowed to, if you're bringing anything that is completely inappropriate, so you're running a rated G game and you're putting adult content in that game, no. That's just, something that shouldn't take place. But other than that, I mean, if you're playing for adults, you're running a game for adults, that should be where it stands. Let's see something real quick. I'm sorry. Let's see, we probably just got a delivery. So I'm just checking to see who. UPS. Okay. Maybe that's a game. I'm expecting a book, actually, also, that I purchased on eBay. So it was a book about the conflict between Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. So by John Peterson. So I wanted to. So maybe that's what just got delivered. I'm not sure. But anyway. So back to. I'm going to ask you
a question. It is a bit out of topic, but you said that you played video games for a long time and then you stopped and you came back to role playing. So what made you stop and come back?
I was just getting burned out from MMOs. So I started playing MMOs around 2002, and I began with Star Wars Galaxies. So I didn't start with like EverQuest or like those really original ones. I started with Star Wars Galaxies, and then I went to World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft was incredibly unplayable when it first launched. It was one of the most horrific launches I've ever seen. And the only reason why it was as popular as it was that you could run it on a computer that was 10 years old. And that's why it had 11 million players at one point, because you could literally have a computer that was a decade old and still run it, which was kind of the secret behind behind it. And I started alpha testing games, and I was obviously beta testing them as well. Started bug testing and even doing some modding and incorporating stories into mods and stuff. So I really got really involved with it. And then I just started to realize that most MMOs out there, they're only fun to play levels 1 through 20, and you can hit there in about a week. All right. And then after that, you just hit grind, and it was nothing but grind. And after playing 50 of them, I got tired. I was just like, nah, it's just not doing it for me anymore. So the last MMO that I was really invested in, it is quite, ironically, was Pathfinder Online. And so I was jumping in on Pathfinder Online, and I knew there was a tabletop game behind it. And I was like, I'm really interested in this. And there was a real clash of culture between MMO video culture and what Ryan Dancy, who was coming from tabletop culture when trying to create this game. And Ryan Dancy really had no understanding of player versus player culture. So he was trying to create an MMO where there was no consequence of losing in player versus player. So didn't want any looting or anything like that. Really wanted to, on one hand, he was saying this is a PvP game, but at the other hand, it was like, but I'm going to severely limit the windows in which you could PvP and how you could do it and how much you could do it. And we're like, that's not going to work, and I was coming out of playing 12 years of EVE Online, which was, as far as expansive as you could possibly get in a game, and as brutal as you could get in a game where real money could be lost in that game, because you could buy, could buy your way to the top in that. And so when you lost a ship, you might actually lose money that you actually spent to get that ship to begin with, and I was playing other, games that were very brutal, and, like Mortal Online was another one that was just, you couldn't walk 10 steps without somebody trying to kill you, kind of thing. And so when I was looking at where they were developing that game and trying to go, I was just like, this is going to be a disaster. It's just not going to work, because you're trying to get two different cultures and force them together, and it's just not going to. So I was like, this is crazy. So I happened to be on the Paizo forums, and this person came out with this blast, kind of like a call to arms for everyone to ban and not participate in the game Mifrog. All right, so Mifrog is a game written by Varg Vikernes, and who's like a black metal person, convicted, sent to prison for murder, and all of this thing, accused of anti-Semitism and anti-LGBTQ and all stuff. His game was trashed in the in media and stuff, like really like obscure media.
Is there any references to that in the game, or is just the man behind the game that has some
It was more
issues?
so the man behind the game. I mean, there were some things in the first edition that you could say, like you could make those those correlations between different outside groups. So was there probably some anti-Semitic like imagery in there? Yes, there probably was. I mean, the main protagonist or undercurrent was anything that was really monotheistic, because he's writing from a pagan perspective, so European paganism was a big core of the magic system of the game and such like that. So yes, there was certainly some things that you could see there in its first edition, but not to the extent that, I mean, so some of it was certainly written in a historical cultural mindset. You know what I'm saying? So we're talking Iron Age Norway, and then how do they look at certain things? So yeah, in comparison to today's sensibilities, that stuff is going to look like, holy cow, this is really, throwing back to the Iron Age. It's like it's like, they're, yes, they were executing male homosexuals, and that was just, a cultural thing. I don't think he made it up. I think it was probably really there. So anyway, that, on the website, they're saying, well, no one should play this game. This game is horrible, blah, 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 blah. And I'm very contrarian. All right. I'm also an academic. I like to, let me see and look at it myself and see what I see going there. And so I looked it up and I was like, well, $10. I was like, for $10, I'd like to learn something, and make my own judgment on it. And so I bought it and I started reading through it. And, I could see the things that they were, obviously pointing. Now, I didn't get the first edition that they were really basing this on. I got like the second edition, like 2.4 was the edition that I got. So some of that was already toned down. But when I was reading through it, I read through it in a much more academic way. And I was looking at game mechanics. And I says, you know what? The game mechanics in here are actually pretty solid. I like the magic system, and I liked how traditional the magic system kind of seemed to it. It was much more of an elemental, druidic kind of magic, system to it. I saw a lot of connections to like Robert E. Howard's view of the ancient world and that kind of thing, or Iron Age kind of thing. So I could see that in there. I could see a lot of there was a lot of lore. It was very, very lore intensive, and things from the Poetic Edda inserted in there, and a lot of ceremonies and rituals and those kinds of things were all in there. So it was very much like a historical fiction RPG. And I mean, some people might argue, well, he's like off the edge with some of his historical insights, but as a game system, it was a pretty solid game system. And that's how I started looking at it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try playing this. And that's really what I started my channel with. That was the first video on my channel, was actually running through it. I never included any of that other that other stuff that could be taken the wrong way. I run a PG-13, kind of game. I didn't really care about that kind of stuff. And so when I was getting into that, then I was like, you know what, I really do have to get my tabletop collection back again, because around 2000, when I got married, I ended up selling almost all of it, or virtually all of it, in a yard sale. So got rid of everything I had,
So
and
that behind you, it's your collection right now?
yeah, that's a restored plus
Yeah.
an additional
Yeah,
collection right now.
it's not a
So
40-year-old collection, right? It's
no, but
yeah.
many of the books are 40 years old. But
Yeah.
no, I don't think that anything here that's the older stuff is anything that I still had. So to make a long story short, that's really how I got into it. Back into tabletop was when someone told me not to. When someone told me not to look at this, and that just sparked my contrarian leanings, and I read through it and I was like, this is not a bad game system. And then I started just buying games that just to see, like, look at the game systems. Like, I 50% of the games behind me I'll probably never run. All right, probably never play, but I read them because they became like my kind of my leisure literature reading, So instead of reading a Star Wars novel or Lord of the Rings for the 17th time, I'll sit there and I'll read, a hero's journey, which I'll probably never run that game, but let me read it, or some, any other of the RPGs that I have there. There's only certain ones that I was like, no, I got to get around to actually running this, and I mean, I certainly want to run, some of the stuff from, from you and from, from Grim Jim, run those games and run some especially those investigative type of game genre, because that's not something that you really see that much of, or at least I don't in my circles. So yeah, it's been, so I have not touched an MMO other than recently I played Crow's Fall, because that I backed like 7 years ago or 8 years ago, and the Kickstarter finally came through like 6 months ago, and it's already dead. All right, which is an interesting thing, because they took so long to develop it, almost forgot that I had backed it, and then when they finally released it and we played it, it's the same as every other MMO I remember playing back, prior to 2015, was that levels 1 to 20, great, a lot of fun, interesting characters, interesting gameplay and everything. After that, let me roll up another character and run it level, 1 through, they have 17 different classes or whatever the heck it is. And after you've done it like 6-7 times, doing the same content 6-7 times over again, it's like, you know what? It's just sitting on the, it's sitting on the computer now, not being touched. Same thing with like Elder Scrolls. I mean, I don't know how they can keep that franchise going with just the same, the same thing going. I mean, each game is, brilliant on its own if you've never played them before, but if you've played one, you've played them all. There's just no innovation. I tried the new Cyberpunk, the Cyberpunk, 2077 or whatever.
Yeah, 27/7.
I literally played it for 10 hours.
I played
I
it
was
for
like,
about 2 hours, and I think 3
yeah,
hours.
I might have played it for 10 hours. Maybe I played a couple of different characters on it, and I was like, this is Grand Theft Auto and Cyberpunk. I mean, it's
Yeah,
there's nothing to it. There's
it's
no,
more difficult to drive the car, I think. Well, I didn't drive
yeah,
a lot.
well, yeah, you can't drive the car. It's like, you're better off just running. It's a lot more difficult to drive the car, but yeah, it's just, you have better graphics, but other than that, it's, yeah. So MMOs, like I don't see MMOs actually having a real future, because they're just, there's no immersion to them whatsoever. There's you have two challenge settings. It's either nearly impossible or too damn easy. That the normal mode is just, there's nothing, it's boring. All right, because it's time consuming to the point that you're like, well, I'm spending a lot of time with this game, but there's no instant gratification, and there's no real challenge. So you would think that, oh, if it falls in between, it'll be a perfect combination. No, it's the worst combination of both things. It takes a long time and you're bored doing it. So it's I don't see how
Never get,
MMOs can,
yeah, I could never get into MMOs because I think it's strange when I see all the people around me doing the same thing that I'm doing. It kind of takes away the immersion.
Neither did I.
yeah.
We played a couple of games, Secret World and
That Secret World was probably the one that I played the most, because it was urban fantasy, so it was a little bit different. But it got to a point that it was getting too hard, and I didn't want to spend money to win things. So
Right.
to buy stuff, so I was like, no, I'm gonna stop playing. But it's weird.
I
to
still
see
play
people-
I'm not sure if it's called Knights of the Old Republic. Is that
Yeah.
the name of it? Yeah. I
Yeah.
play that one, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's interesting. But after playing the video games, the computer games, those were much better. So
Yeah.
of course they
This-
were.
Yeah,
It's a
the
different thing.
Secret World, when it was first released, that game is brilliant. I
Yeah,
love that
it's
game.
different from the others, right?
The re-release of it, like what they repackaged it as now,
Yeah.
like what's it called, Secret World Legends or something like that.
Yeah.
That game is horrible. It lost. It's like they took all of the soul of the game out of it, and I don't know what they did to it, but it's like it doesn't play at all like it did when it first came out. When it first came out, Lovecraftian slapped you in the
Yeah.
Yes,
face.
it was, I
I
really
mean,
liked
I
the
was like,
references. That was great.
yeah, I was like, and just everything was just, it was probably one of the most perfect MMO experiences I had. Again, levels 1 through 20, once you started hitting above that, you had to start doing those. I never got past that challenge that you had to go to unlock the rest of the thing, that where you had to fight that one guy, that gatekeeper. You had to fight the gatekeeper. I never
Yo.
once got past the gatekeeper.
I don't think I got that far.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen, because they made it virtually impossible to get. I was like, the rest of the game is beyond this. Yeah, he was a true gatekeeper, all right? He's gonna make people quit the game. It was like, it was horrible. I was like, who in their right mind thought that this was a good idea? And you had to, well, I know what they did. They tied purple gear, which you could buy,
Mhm.
to being able to beat so you needed a whole, you needed to have to be fully decked out in all purple gear in order to be able to beat the gatekeeper, and I was like, so then just give me the second half of the game as a DLC.
Yeah.
Say, here's another $10, you can go beyond this. I would have done that in a heartbeat. Instead of spending $10 and still have to go through an impossible challenge to get further in the game. So, but yeah, leading up to that point, the game was phenomenal.
Going back to the safety tools, I
Yeah.
have one positive thing to say about it. About 3 years ago, when they were starting to talk about it, I am also a contrarian, so I got really annoyed by that. I got into several arguments online, and then I said, okay, I'm going to translate my old scenarios and I'm going to publish this, and oh, it worked.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the only
the thing
positive
is,
thing.
yeah, it's the other thing that I thought, to take the positive out of the negative is I think really important, and sometimes it's hard to do. It's hard to, like I said, like when I'm on the internet, I could very easily slip into that trollish like behavior. Like I will mock the crap out of you. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do all kinds of things. I'll set little traps, for you to fall into, and then and just just lose my mind into that kind of thing. And then every once in a while, I'll step back and I'll say, but wait a second, let me, instead of focusing on the negative, let me talk about why you should be playing this, why you should be doing this. Or, I never tell people how to run their games. I tell them, like when I do my tips, I'll say, these are the things that have worked for me. I never tell you how you should run your game. These are what have worked for me. You want to take them or leave them, and that's up to you. All right. And so that's how I always try to think of when I'm putting something online, on YouTube or with my live streams now, is this is how I have seen it. This is how I've experienced it. This is what has worked for me. This is why I think you should be playing this. I try to, and sometimes I slip, and I'll say Strixhaven sucks or something like that,
Which is true.
but
It's our opinion. So
you're not gonna attract anybody to an alternative by saying that's bad. It might be bad, but you're not going to win anybody with that. You're going to say, no, this is better. This does it better. And this is why it does it better. Or don't even acknowledge that and say, look at this here. This is what, this is all about. And recently we've been going back and forth, like the 3 pillars is a big thing now. Everyone's talking about the 3 pillars of RPGs. So they, combat, exploration, and interaction, which they say, human interaction or interaction in the game now, social interaction needs to have dice mechanics. And I'm like, why do you
No.
need dice mechanics? You don't need
No.
rules
No.
or how to have a social
Simply
interaction.
no. I
Yeah,
hate that.
I'm gonna roll dice. I was like, I don't even use morale, and the morale system in my games, because I was like, no, the players will learn whether they should stand and fight or they should run like hell. All right. If they have the morale, all right, it's my job to set up the scenario to instill in them the fear that their character is about to die, and they'll either get the hint and turn and run, or like in Call of Cthulhu, they'll either go insane or die, and there's no reason to have a dice mechanic to it, and there are, some like one or two individuals that are saying, oh no, it's great that there is a complex dice mechanic to human interaction in a role-playing game. It's like, that's what this up here is. That's what, that's what your brain is for. That's the complex, mechanism for having interaction. That's how you're going to care about the NPC in the group. That's not done with a dice mechanic. That's getting your players invested in that immersive experience that they're supposed to be having. You can't roll dice to do that. That's just, to me, that's insane to think that is going to improve the game.
That stops the role playing. If you don't interact naturally, it's not role playing, really.
Yeah, you're rolling dice. It's the wrong kind of roll. It's ROLL.
I'm not sure about that. Those three pillars. Where did that come from? I think I saw that somewhere, but I'm not sure.
No, the three pillars goes all the way back to Gary Gygax. Talking about the games are combat, interaction, and exploration. And combat is combat. Everybody knows combat. And I've been arguing that combat requires a formula, a mathematical formula, and dice. Dice do not tell a story. Dice determine outcomes. All right. It's a mathematical equation that's being rolled out. You have a target number, you have your roll, you have your damage dice, you have your hit points. All of that is laid out. Why does that have to be laid out? Because no player is ever going to choose to have their character fail, or die, or just not be successful. They will never choose it. So you have to have an impartial arbiter of what occurs, and that's the dice roll. Now, the DM, to a certain extent, and possibly even the players, might have to interpret what occurred, but the baseline is directed by the dice. You can do somewhat of that with exploration, but exploration I don't consider to be just you're traveling, you're exploring territory, land, terrain, or anything. There's also exploration of the mind. You're learning things about the world and such like that. So if there is any dice rolling there or numbers attached to it, it's more so modifiers than it is actual determiners. So you're not going to determine anything by dice. Like, I don't use, and I was strongly criticized by like an old school, or supposedly an old school gamer who was very rules as written kind of, the bro SR, where I said, I don't use encounter tables. And I even misread a counter table. Instead of saying the D8 and then the D12, it was supposed to be the D12 and then the D8 to use it. I was like, I don't use encounter tables. I just, when my characters, when I roll to see if there's a random encounter, then I think about the environment that they're in. What could they possibly encounter? And then I throw it at them, and it could be an encounter that, I don't use difficulty ratings either, or challenge ratings, CR. I don't use that. If I want to throw a beholder at a party of level 2 characters, They better know to run, it's like, otherwise they're all going to die, so, but did the holder make sense in that particular dungeon? If not, I want to put it in, so when it comes to that, pillar of exploration, I think as a game master or as a dungeon master, you have to really incorporate the ecology of the location that they're in into what you're presenting the players with. All right. That way it makes sense, and you're creating that, but you're not dice rolling. You can't dice roll that. Dice rolling that on a random table is going to give you it's going to give you the original Caves of Chaos that just make no sense. That's one of the criticisms of old school modules, is that oftentimes their dungeons just don't make sense. There's no reason why the Caves of Chaos, which is B2, Keep on the Borderlands, the Caves of Chaos make absolutely no sense. Those different groups of humanoids and monsters would never live next door to each other. And sometimes even connecting caverns, caverns and spaces, they would never live next to each other. It wouldn't work. All right. So there's times when this stuff just doesn't make sense, and you have to be creative and modify it. And then the last one, the interaction, that your interaction with NPCs, like I said, a dice roll doesn't do it. You're either going to make them care about an NPC because they have a use for that NPC first, and then they develop a frequent interaction with that NPC, and then they will start to care about that NPC. You will start to think, hey, you know what? They care about this NPC. I'm going to give this NPC some personality and some goals. This NPC might have a different mood than they saw the last time, and then you can spark a different story along those lines and say, oh, you know what? My child is missing. Went with the caravan and now is with the different. Now you just created a mini adventure, because now they're going to be compelled to go and seek to rescue that child or whatever. And that's how you can't do that with dice rolling.
Yeah,
dice rolling is going to be very, very just like too clean and too, no soul to it whatsoever. It's just
like a
going to give you
computer game.
numbers. Yeah,
again, like a computer game.
It's the computer game mentality. It's like that's where they're looking to move the game. It's no longer Dungeons and Dragons. It's just, I don't know. It's a computer game. It really is a tabletop computer game.
So a lot of people playing probably will, well, they would be better just playing computer games, I think. It's they want to change a game that should be played with people into something that will probably not work, because playing a computer game is an all different experience. You're playing by yourself or online.
Yeah, and they won't be able to handle an MMO.
Yeah.
They cannot handle an MMO. Now, a player that can handle spiders at a tabletop role-playing game cannot handle PvP in an MMO. They will emotionally crumble in the time span of 2 kills. they will not last more than, and I've seen people do this. I've seen people actually quit games after an hour, and just say, no, I'm done with this. I can't play this, and it's just like, well, you're in a game. I'm running into that. I'm playing Starfleet Command battles. All right, so it's a, it's a thing on Apple. It's a browser game, right? So, but there's PvP in it, and people are just like, oh, they're not following the rules of engagement, that they're killing me when I'm mining, and they're not supposed to kill me when I'm mining, or they have to wait until I have a surplus in my mind before they kill me. And I'm like, that's not, no one's going to live by those rules. There's always going to be somebody on the outlier, and if you can't handle that, it's the wrong game for you to be playing. Go back to a single player game. You know, I'm going to jump back into Skyrim and just play it out and just see, you know, and just see, is this what they're really looking for? You know, and I might do a video and that's where I'm going to get very tongue in cheek and be like, I'm playing my Tabaxi rogue, you know, and this isn't Skyrim. This is, you know, this is Strixhaven that I'm going into, and this is my, you know, and just play the whole thing out like that. And I say, this is the experience that they're looking for out of Dungeons and Dragons. And it's just not, it's creating a safe space. They want a safe space in a multiple individual environment, and you can't be safe.
Yeah, it's not possible. So what do you think will come out of this? Is this a safety tools? Of course, is this a fad? It will end, or they will?
Yeah, I think that it will end, because I think that largely, and maybe that's because these last 2 years, it never really got to get a kickoff, because
it was on pause.
Because online play has really taken over, and
well, even though they were using those in online play, there was that controversy. That guy Adam Coble was running a game, and it was online.
That was an online game, and well, that's because he was broadcasting it, you know, and that was complete nonsense too, because I think that was contrived.
Yeah, I think the same.
Because, I think it was contrived, although I think that they were not anticipating the backlash that caused them to end the whole thing. But so it was certainly a miscalculation on their part. But
the facial expressions on the players that were trying to look uncomfortable, that looked bad acting.
Yeah, it was like at any moment.
Yeah, they could have said something.
That particular woman, at any moment, she could have said, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this.
But she was just
and everybody else was just like, huh,
looking.
It was almost like they were playing into it, and it was. I think it was completely contrived. And what they didn't expect was that Twitter was going to cancel him.
Yeah. I think so. Well, that for him it was unexpected, really.
He wasn't expecting that the Twitter backlash was going to end up canceling him, and they probably didn't know what to do in that circumstance. They were probably like, "Oh crap, this really did backfire. Well, we can't back out of it now, because the jig will be up, that we'll be admitting that this was contrived, you know, and we have to just roll with it now, and, you know, do your apology tour." And they tried to bring him in on not Strixhaven, on the other one, on Candlekeep. They tried that.
He was going to do something on Modiphius, Dune. It was supposed to be sensitivity reader, I think, and but that was before it got caught up and fired from that.
He was supposed to be published in Candlekeep as one of the contributing.
That's the one
adventures.
where they omitted his name, right? And then someone discovered it, and
they discovered it, and then they had to either pull the adventure or, you know, I think that's what they did. And then somebody else pulled out, because
there was someone else. Yeah,
they were. I think it might have even been Daniel Kwan, which I think is a piece of garbage anyway. But he pulled out because he didn't like the way that they treated the bullywugs. They made the bullywugs like a culturally not savage, but just very culturally primitive, because they were portrayed as a primitive tribe, and so he thought that was offensive, and so he wanted his He said, that's not how I wrote the thing, but once you give it to them, they can run with it however they want. And that's basically, so he wanted his name pulled from it as well. I think it was him. It might have been somebody else. But I know that he was certainly complaining about the cultural appropriation and the, and the depiction of primitives. He thought was racially charged because there must be frog people in the world. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's like
The
maybe
frogs
the
are
French.
the French, exactly.
It was the French. Well, the British word for them was frogs, right? They called them frogs, and the British were
Yeah.
called limeys. So yeah, maybe that's what it was. Maybe the French objected. Those filthy French people.
So you were saying that now that things are well, not probably not just now, but in a while.
I think that I think that the safety tools had their time and place, and then they faded, and I think that mostly going to online had kind of diffused that, so there's no place really for them to go. And I don't think that the industry is really going to get back to those conventions. I think that they're going to continue with virtual conventions. I know some of them are trying to get back to, like they did do a Gen Con, but it was, with all the safety rules and everything, I think that they were saying something like the numbers were a third of what they normally are. And I didn't see anything really positive coming out of it, other than the fact that they just had them. I think that it was a capital loss for many vendors. And so they're going to have a hard time getting vendors to go back to those kinds of things. And they're very difficult to organize and expensive to run. And, it's just, there's no reason for it, other than, let people get back to more traditional gaming of, playing in their homes and playing in their, the small shops here and there. And, maybe the convention thing is an unnecessary thing to have, because it's not like a Comic-Con, where you're going and you're going there to shop, basically. This is
See the
a
stars,
gaming
right? To see the panels of the actors and all that stuff and
yeah,
creators. Yeah.
I mean, so I mean, if they went more along those lines of, now the last Gen Con I went to was in 1985, so that's how far back I go with it, and that was the only gaming convention I went to. I've been to plenty of Comic-Cons and things like that, but I just don't see that they've created a good culture to make you want to play with a group of people that you've never in person, that you've never met before. They've made it where it's very, like, who wants to deal with all of that kind of nonsense taking place at your table? It's like, if I'm sitting at my table, I want to know that you're sitting down, you're ready to play. And you don't have that at
and
a
with
gaming
safety tools,
convention
it's
anymore.
even worse, right?
It's like, even in the absence of safety tools, it's like, even if they didn't have that, it's just that, just knowing that people will come to your table and make demands, of what you're gonna do. Why it's like, recently, 2 weeks ago, my dungeon master, he's running a Holmes edition game. All right, so he advertised this for like 2 weeks. Holmes edition, across the board. Here's some pre-gen characters if you don't have the system and want to create one. So gave all kinds of, because the Holmes edition of D&D, which was like 77, 78 edition, that's the blue box edition of it. It allows you to play anything that's in the monster manual section of the Holmes edition. So you could play any of those things. You can play a lizard man, you could play a brass dragon, if you wanted to, and you'll stat it out with the DM, and you can play that, that's fine. So it does allow, it only gives like one paragraph description of what you can do to play, any creature you feel like playing. So a new person, I believe he was like 14 or 15 years old, never played an RPG before, never played Dungeons and Dragons before, comes to the table with a character from Volo's Guide. All right. So now that makes me wonder, it's like, well, if you've never played, any of these games before, you coming out with Volo's Guide, it's like, where'd you get that from? What made you even think of getting that from? So he might have been a plant to begin with, but came with a character from Volo's Guide. And the Dungeon Master was like, well, no, this is an old D&D game. It's not 5th edition. We're not using Volo's Guide, so you can't play. He was looking to play a Kenku. All right. So you can't play that. It's got to be, to this. If you want to play some kind of a bird creature, you can, but using Holmes edition in order to create that. You can't play that class. But I don't understand. Well, I want to play this. I want to play it. Nope. You could play the pre-gen bugbear. You could play this. You could play that. We can make a bird character, that's based on something that you'll find there. He would not accept it, playing anything else but what he wanted to bring to the table. And the DM was finally, no, you can't play that. Then he feigned, like I had to leave early. And when I came back, he said, oh, I said, what happened to that player? And he was like, oh, he said that he wasn't feeling well and he had to go. So I just laughed. I was like, no, he didn't like being told no. And so that's why he left. All right. So he wanted his way, or it's no way. He was at least he left without trying to disrupt it. But it's only because it was online that the DM was able to say no. And if it really got bad, the DM could have just, bing, you're off of Zoom, because that's how we played on Zoom. So he could have just blocked them off of Zoom, and that would have been the end of it. But again, back to back to what you're asking, like, do I see these kinds of things changing? I see more DMs now, and particularly in the old school, I see more DMs now willing to say no. All right, willing to say no, that's not what we're playing here, and that's a positive thing. I think there's a lot more pushback now than there was 2 years ago when this stuff was starting to really pick up some steam. And I think people now are just like, you know what, I'm done with it. I'm done hearing it. There's a political commentator here in the United States. He worked in the Reagan White House. All right, as like a not a press secretary, but like a chief of staff or assistant chief of staff. So he's very, very conservative. But he said at one point, he said, when you give no forgiveness, for supposed past grievances, eventually people will just say, well, I have nothing else to give. I have no more apologies left. So I have zero left to give you that you're going to accept. If you're never going to accept an apology, or you're never going to grant forgiveness, then I'm going to stop apologizing, especially for things that I didn't do. And I'm just going to say, F you, I'm doing my own thing. And I think that's where the OSR is starting to get to. We've heard, oh, the OSR is, your gatekeepers, is misogynist, it's racist, it's this, it's that, it's homophobic, it's blah, blah, blah. And no matter what we say, I mean, no matter what I do or say, I cannot change the fact that I am a white middle-aged male. All right, can't change it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm not going to, because there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to apologize for anything that I did not do. You know what I'm saying? It's like I had nothing to do with it. My own ethnic background is most likely never did anything along those lines. You know what I'm saying? It's just there's nothing for me to do. And so if I'm not going to apologize for it, and you're not going to forgive me, even if I did. So you give me nothing. So I'm going to give you nothing in return. I have zero to give you. And so I'm just going to go along. So if you want to come to my table with a safety tool, no. Demanding a safety tool, no. You want to come to me with a consent form? No, I don't consent for you to sit at my table. All right. That should be the first check box there. Approved, rejected, rejected. As soon as you come there, I'll put a rejected stamp right on it, then goodbye. You're coming to my table. All right. I'm not even inviting you in. I'm saying there's an open door. You're welcome to come in if you want to. If you can sit down. I don't care what you are. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care what your ethnicity is, your religion, or your gender or identity or any of that stuff. You're sitting at my table to play the game that I'm running, and you're welcome to do so. As soon as you don't feel comfortable, you're welcome to leave. But what you're not going to do is, you as an individual are not going to change what the rest of us are doing at the table. All right. It will never be the tyranny of the one. All right. It will, you just have to be the adult and say, this is not for me, get up and walk. All right. And that's perfectly fine. And that's why I don't see safety tools lasting, because they just defy adulthood. they defy maturity and adulthood.
Yeah, it's saying it's necessary to say no right now to that and other demands, because if you say no, maybe we have less players and we have to find some others or something like that. But things will get on somehow we can circle around it and keep on playing, or else there's no way to continue, because accepting all the demands, they always demand something else. If you accept this,
Yes.
then they go a little bit further.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to wrap this up.
Right. So it's been a real pleasure. Real pleasure meeting you, Sylvia, also.
Thank you.
It was nice being on the show. Like I said, this is only my second time that I've actually been interviewed. So it's just like, I never know how to actually do these things and everything. Now you're a professional at interviewing, because that's your, that's your journalistic background.
I'm better at interviewing than being interviewed. I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just something that that I'm happy to talk about is about the hobby, and and how I'd like to see the hobby, particularly, well, the hobby in general, overall. Like, I really hope that big companies start to realize that their better years were in their legacy, than in their potentially the future, or certainly the future that they're looking to go to. I hope that they start to realize that being the McDonald's hamburger of the tabletop RPG, not community, but of the industry, is not a good place. Sure, you're selling a lot of hamburgers. You're selling the most books. No one can deny that. And this is a recent argument that I've been making. It's that, but if I put 5 hamburgers in front of you and one of them is the McDonald's hamburger, that's the last one that anybody is going to pick. Because it might be the easiest one to get your hands on. Maybe it's the closest hamburger, but they will reach over for the next one in line and at least give it a try. And they'll probably taste it. It'll be better. That McDonald's hamburger will be always the first one. There's 5 of them in every town. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's like they made it so darn convenient, and it's a household name, and And that's what people talk about. And I don't know a single person who says the McDonald's hamburger is the best burger they've ever eaten.
Yeah.
No one says that, but if I ask them, have you eaten 100 McDonald's hamburgers this year? They'll say yes. You know what I'm saying? It's like, was it the best burger you had? No, by far not. And that's what I think that's what Dungeons and Dragons, has become. It's become the McDonald's hamburger. The other thing that I think that people don't understand is this is a very American view. All right. I don't think D&D is the biggest game in the UK or probably even in Portugal. It's certainly not the biggest game.
Perhaps
in
it
Japan.
is, but well, not kids probably when they start with the Dungeons and Dragons. But
Yes, still.
the older people don't play Dungeons and Dragons usually. Play other
No?
stuff. Yeah, it's more. But it's probably still the biggest game here. I think so. Though I do not talk to anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's the kids who are playing it.
All right. In the UK, I would think it's Warhammer or, Dragon Warrior is huge because that was UK.
Yeah.
It's got to be something Modifius in Germany.
Yes.
And Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu absolutely in Japan is the #1 game. D&D doesn't even come close to Call of Cthulhu in Japan. Probably not allowed in China. So it's like, they'll print the books in China, but they won't let you play it there. So
so their market doesn't count for this.
Yeah. So that's just the impression that I get, is that it has become just such a, it's become such a enclosed thing that people just think, oh, this is the biggest seller. And maybe it is because but it's certainly not the most popular worldwide, and I think collectively the others are probably more popular. It just makes more money because people are,
And then some countries have their own industry. In Spain, they do a lot of games. In Italy, they also do a lot of games.
There's some industry.
In Sweden, so there's some industry in some countries here in
probably
Europe.
more. Some countries
these are the ones we know.
Yeah. Well, it seems there are some people writing in Poland too.
Yes,
and Hungary.
Yeah.
And well, who knows? I don't know.
Well, yeah.
Some other countries, I had no idea.
Yeah, I did a recent video where I was pointing out, I think game companies like Free League and Modifius are poised to take that lead spot. I really do. I think that, and they're already working together, but I think just for distribution, like Modifius will advertise Free League games, even though they're not working on them in the writing process together. Not. But I think they're doing the distribution.
Yeah, I think it's well, you can buy the books in Free League, I think, but you can also buy them through Modifius.
On the Modifius's website will sell Free League games. And like I said, I think that's a collaboration for distribution purposes, for printing purposes and shipping purposes because of Brexit and all of the stuff going on there, and just the high cost of shipping. Modifius just started to distribute directly from the United States. And so, and when I say just, that really just started within like the last 6 months because of,
before Brexit
shutdowns so now it's like, it got so bad that it was like, all right, so I'm going to buy 5 parsecs for, whatever that game is called, that solo RPG. And it was like $26 and it was like $35 to ship. I was like, I'm not going to spend, almost $70 plus VAT tax and all this other crap that comes onto it. I said, no, I'm not going to spend $70 for a game that you're looking to sell for $30, just because you can't print on demand here in the United States. Well, now they they
We
have
solved
a
that.
different website where you can order directly from Modifius, but it's Modifius US
Mhm.
as opposed to UK, and that now you have access to that.
Yeah,
I
Modifius
think
is
that
growing a lot. And
yes,
Free League
and
also. They appeared and boom.
yes, and they're buying up IPs
Mhm.
that are big name IPs, and I said my prediction was that they are going to get Terminator. Although someone said that actually somebody
I
else
think
said
there is
secured
yeah, that there
Terminator.
was a plan to make some Terminator game, and it wasn't Free League, it was some other
Well, Evil
company.
had tried to get Terminator, and that's why they went with Cthulhu.
Oh yeah,
Because they couldn't afford Terminator, so they went with Cthulhu because Cthulhu was public domain free.
yeah,
Even though they hate
yes.
Cthulhu and
That's the
they
one
hate
at
H.P. Lovecraft, yeah.
yeah.
But they'll make money off of the IP. But someone else is making a Terminator game, but I really thought that either Free League or Modifius would have secured that. They still can, and they'll produce something. Now Modifius just lost Conan. Conan reverted. They only had this one
Oh,
time, I guess, time limited
Mhm.
access to it. Now Conan is owned by someone else, and they own the whole shebang. So they own the comic books and the role-playing games, and possibly even the movie and other rights too. So I think they've consolidated them all. But they're going to keep on grabbing these things. Now Blade Runner
Yes,
Yeah,
was picked up by
Free League.
Free League. Yeah,
Free League. So Free League grabbed
it's
Blade
probably the
Runner,
next game.
and again, I go back to they're doing this, and they're looking at the OSR, or they're looking at people our age, right, as being their, as being the initial purchasers
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
these things. That's why we're seeing so many of these franchises from the 1980s
Yeah,
coming back. All right, and it's because the creativity of the 80s was tremendous. I mean, look at all these franchises that, and D&D being one of them.
Mhm.
Really, I
Yes.
know D&D started in 74, but it really
Yeah.
didn't explode
Until the 80s, right?
until between 80 and 86.
Yeah, and Modifius
know?
probably best-selling game. It's still Star Trek.
Yeah, which is one of their worst games, at least according to many. It doesn't match up well with their system, but yes, it's one of the most popular games that they have there. Conan is always going to be niche, but it's phenomenal for that system. That system was the 2D20 system, and the motivation, and the Doom pool, which I don't actually use the Doom pool, but the motivation system, was a brilliant system for it. It creates a real cinematic, dynamic kind of a system. A lot of fun to play, and a lot of fun to run it as well. But they have other franchises that they're going to grab onto, like Alien for Free
Mhm.
League is well, highly recommended.
It was
Won all kinds of awards.
that one was a success.
Warcraft
Yeah,
is Free League, won all kinds of. I mean, they're racking up all of the awards, all of the recognition, all of the innovation, these IPs that sell. I mean, I just see them. They initially had, or they're looking to get, I think, Power Rangers, and which are still through a different company, Power Rangers, and the other one that they're looking to run. The other franchise, I'm slipping my mind now. But Power Rangers and not Transformers. Is Transformers coming out with a new?
I think I heard something about it.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's Power Rangers and GI Joe. Power Rangers and
Oh,
GI
yeah.
Joe
Yeah, that's it.
are coming from Renegade. Renegade Games is producing them. So so all of these 1980s IPs are making a comeback, and to me, that's a rejection of
Mhm.
a rejection of the modern, the modern doesn't create new stuff.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah,
have that same creativity. You see it in Hollywood.
they have
Hollywood
to
doesn't
remake
have it.
everything.
Yeah, everything's a reboot, and it's
Mhm.
usually terrible.
Yeah.
Very few examples of where it's not.
We stopped watching movies, recent movies.
Yeah.
We're watching things from the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
great.
In the
so
80s.
It's
yeah,
great.
so I see the hobby moving, like outside of Wizards of the Coast. I see the hobby moving in a very positive direction. I think that we just have to focus on being more positive about our side of that fence, and saying this is why you should be playing these games, and this is where the innovation is, and this is where those old school IPs are coming to, and this is where you want to be. This is the real future of the hobby. you know um I don't think any one game company is the hobby. I don't think any one game is the
Mhm.
hobby. That's the other, that's the other belief, is that, oh, if this collapses, if this disappears, the whole hobby comes to an end. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't
There's
think so.
absolutely no way, that it does.
At
McDonald's
least
could
in a
shut
small
down
scale.
tomorrow, and no one will really miss the burgers.
No.
You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
I wouldn't really. I haven't
Yeah.
haven't eaten a McDonald's burger in more than 15 years, I'm sure.
So
I don't really like them. Really, really
no,
don't like.
no, they're not good quality. Once in a while, I'll buy a burger to give to my dog. That's an honest truth. It's like she likes them, but other than that, it's not a burger of choice. No, and 5e is not a game of choice.
Well, I hope you're right. And next time you
Mm.
talk, there will
Yeah.
be some good
Yes.
news.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah. I have to get around to. I just been trying to. I've been so focused on my campaign, my AD&D, first edition campaign, and just putting so much into that, and then doing videos and bringing people on, the channel, because that's something I want to do more of. I want to bring more OSR creators and commentators onto my channel and really develop that, and then just trying to find the right system to start writing again, and I'm producing some game stuff to put on drive through and other outlets as well. So looking forward to going to a game convention. I'm hoping to go to VentureCon in July, and hopefully that's still going to go on. We had some cancel culture
Some issues, yeah.
with that, and hopefully that gets rectified, and he can get that back up and running again. And I will certainly make the trip out there, and and run some games there while I'm there.
With no safety tools.
No, they're not allowed to have
Exactly.
In
safety tools.
VentureCon, I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yes, no safety
Yeah.
tools. So
No safety tools allowed.
so
and
it will be a safe space.
and adult, right? I think he
Mhm.
even put,
Yes.
18 plus, and no safety tools allowed. And so that's, I think that's the kind of way that we should present, the hobby moving forward, and what the real movement of the OSR movement is to say, no, we've been doing this already.
Mhm.
All right, you're just putting names onto what we've already done. And our era of the RPG hobby was the golden age.
Yeah.
All right, this now might be more popular, but
Yeah.
it's not the golden age. It's not the best version of the hobby. The hobby was best back in, the mid to late 80s, and even through the Satanic Panic, because the way the hobby reacted to the Satanic Panic was push back.
Yeah. Fight against it.
They didn't bend the knee.
Yeah, it's the time when I really got into
Yeah.
role playing. So
Yeah.
in the 90s.
It's like,
and well,
yeah.
for example, Vampire and the Cult and all those horror games, they came out in the 90s. So, well, there was fighting back. People were fighting back.
Yeah, that's what they really, need to remember about, because they bring up the satanic panic now without bringing up what the response was.
Mhm.
And I have to find the article. I have to do a whole thing on the article that Frank Metzner wrote a response to the satanic panic at the time. And the letter was like the Gettysburg Address. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the kind of impact that it really had. It actually did convince many people, now, you know what, this satanic panic movement is just wrong-headed. And it's not where the hobby should go. It's not where any social, entertainment endeavor should go. And I have to find that article because it's, it is something that was really important, probably saved the hobby, or certainly saved TSR and Dungeons and Dragons at the time, as much as Dragonlance did as well, which was kind of an olive branch, to the, to the religious right, because that was really a right movement, or from the right movement, a conservative movement at the time. And now we're seeing more of an attack from the left, and so it's kind of interesting that they're kind of pulling from each other's playbooks, and just, how 35 years makes such a difference politically, and so, but I think that the hobby is going to, the OSR is definitely going to move the hobby in a better direction, and hopefully, with up and coming companies like Modifius, even though they do hire sensitivity, right, leaders, which drives me nuts.
They are
I wish,
influenced by that too.
Yeah, I wish they didn't bend that knee, to that kind of thing. Hopefully they'll realize, hey, we can really capture the lead position in this if we don't do that, and keep on doing what they're doing, and make quality games, make quality products, material, physical quality products, and and keep on going that way.
Well, okay, Richard.
All right.
Thank you for coming
again.
Thank you for having me.
Again.
It was a really enjoyable, a great discussion, and I'll invite you to, especially when you get your next project written, and invite you two on the channel. And
I have several written. I'm just waiting for Jim to finish his one.
Jim to finish it. Yeah, I actually have to have Jim on one time. So I've had you on my channel. I've had RPG Pundit on my channel. I like to bring Jim on, and I'd certainly like to get Avenger on as well at some point. So, like I said, I want to try to get as many OSR, people on, both developers and content creators as well. Whether they be YouTubers or whatever, and just getting people on the channel to have chats just like this.
Exactly,
so it's a real pleasure.
It's always interesting.
Well,
chat with someone else.
Be sure to come back one of
Yes,
these days.
I will.
And let's hope you come back with to talk about something new that you created.
Yeah.
Yes.
For
that
example.
would be great.
Yeah. Hopefully within the next couple of months, I'll actually have something that I'll be happy to talk about.
Well, okay, so that's a good way to start another conversation.
Yes.
In the next few months.
Yes.
Okay. Have a nice weekend.
All right, you two, take care, both of you.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Right. Take care.